So I've been playing Elder Scrolls Online lately, and I installed Elder Scrolls Online toward the end of last year, so I haven't been playing it for very long, really. A few months. Started playing it, and then stopped playing it, and then came back, and as I look at all the different game worlds that you can be part of, there's single-player RPGs, which are pretty cool, like Skyrim or something of that nature. And then there's your MMOs, of course. And I come back to MMOs because when you're role-playing, the idea of going into a different world, you want to imagine that that world is alive.
Shameful. This is not the Dominion we were promised.
And what better way to be able to explore a living world than to be part of a world that actually is alive?
Oh, why did you do that?
And Isabel, companion Isabel, is always the gentle, sympathetic character in this game, so monkey hunting is not something that she's fond of. But I do want to gather the white meat, so there's that. Anyway, but yeah, what better place to find a world that feels alive than in a world that really is alive? And so I really gravitate more toward the MMO versus a single-player RPG. Doesn't mean that I would never want to play a single-player RPG, but when you have MMOs, it really is hard to go back to a single-player RPG. Especially when you figure, you're going to get to the end of it. You're going to get to a point where you've kind of had enough. And with an MMO, it truly is that sense of a largely endless experience. And then I love the idea of participating in a player-driven economy in some way. And to do that, you really have to play a MMO of some kind. So that brings me to the question of, why maybe ESO is better than the others. And truth is, you can't say that one MMO is better than the others. I mean, in a sense, maybe. In some ways, it's better. But it really is quite subjective. If you've spent a lot of time, you've built friendships, and you've put many, many hours into a particular MMO world, then it becomes personal. It's amazing, and there's no way that you're going to go to some other one and say, oh, this one's so much better, because it's kind of like home. You find one that's home, and then that's the one. But I'm amazed how many of these monkeys are just out here to be found. We're getting tons of white meat and bananas. What a good deal. A little bit savage, unfortunately, but such is life. Anyway, back to my point.
Another find for your pack.
I like big open worlds where you can just head out and say, what do I want to do today? And then go explore. And maybe you do a quest. Or maybe you just go somewhere. Kind of like if you make a cup of coffee in the morning and you say, all right, I'm going to go for a walk. And you step outside. You say, do I want to go left or right? I don't know. I'll go where the road takes me, right? And so when you think about MMOs in that context, which ones give you that ability to have a sense of doing whatever you'd like, of just heading out and exploring? And when you look at it from that perspective, there's a lot of MMOs that don't do a very good job at that. And that's alright, because a lot of people don't really put a lot of focus on that. That's not their main thing. That's not what they're playing for. They're playing for dungeons or raiding or something. And that's alright. But for me, it's the exploration. And it's the sense of being part of a shared world, but also not obligated to necessarily play with other people. And I want to be able to, definitely. I don't want to be in a barren world with nobody, but I do want to be able to make the choice. Do I want to play with people or not? And I think there's nothing worse than the feeling of obligation associated with a game. When you start thinking, oh, I have to log in, you know, people are expecting me, or I've got to jump into the Discord server and do this or that with some people. Then it starts to be a chore. It starts to feel like an obligation. It's not a joy.
Befitting a knight. Well done.
So, to me, it rules out. It rules out a game like Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV is a pretty cool game. I'll give it that. But if you exclude the dungeons from Final Fantasy XIV, there really isn't much left to talk about. Because the open world isn't open at all, really. You know, it's more like running down hallways, because you're just going from one point to another point. And you're going from one quest activity location to another. Or you're just sort of queuing up for a dungeon and then waiting, and probably doing nothing while you wait. So, despite liking some of the things about Final Fantasy XIV, it wasn't a game that I enjoyed playing very much. And, you know, I'd say I had a similar experience with Genshin Impact. And that's not an MMO, but it's still a online live service sort of a game, and it's a game with dailies. It's a game that encourages you to sign in every day, and I really like the aesthetics of Genshin Impact. I like the story of it, especially the earlier part that was around Mondstadt and things. I really enjoy it, and I am not going to ever detract from that, but that doesn't change the fact that there were a lot of times and I just felt like, you know, gee, I don't know. I don't really want to do a quest in Genshin Impact. I don't really want to grind anything in that game. I don't. So if I was paying for the little thing that gives you gems every day, Blessings of the Welkin Moon, you sign in and you get 70 or something Prima gems. Well, I'd just sign in and get them, and then sign out. Well, I'll play the game more, maybe tomorrow or some other time. It just wasn't, but it wasn't really a game I was having fun with anymore. And that's alright, that's alright. It's a game that I did have fun with. I definitely had fun with it before, but I'm not really having fun with it right now. So, that doesn't mean I'm never coming back. It just means I'm not really gonna play that game right now because I'm not really having fun with it. You know, I played Lord of the Rings Online, and I thought, that's an amazing game. It has this wonderful open world. It has absolutely wonderful lore. I couldn't say enough good about the Lord of the Rings and the sense of lore that goes along with it. And yet, I also have to point out that Lord of the Rings Online doesn't have a huge community. Its UI's pretty clunky. It's not got a very good interface if you want to do trading or something like that. And in terms of diversity of biome, the Elder Scrolls Online really looks a lot better. one thing I love about the Elder Scrolls Online is just how many cities there are. Like, if you play a game like Guild Wars 2, you find, there's one city for each of the main races. So you have a lion city, you have the human city, you have the plant city.
Oh, nice.
You have...
What did you find?
No, what's the other one? Nord City, I guess. Oh, those guys are alright. And they're not really all that big. They're just, there's 4 hubs in the game for players to gather around. There's the new Asian-themed one. Which I want to say I'm forgetting the name of right now. Anyway, I think it's amazing to be able to kind of head out on foot exploring, and then you just don't know where the path's going to take you today. And all the different places in the game are vastly different. And you have a lot of different cities that you can explore and encounter and engage with. And ESO really does. It has that sense of a depth of lore. It has the voice acting. It has absolutely elegant graphics. It's got a sort of an action style of movement and engagement with the world, so you don't have the tab targeting. It has a lively community of people that are interested in interacting with the game's economy, and it's also got an active community of people that want to roleplay in the game, people who want to do PvP, people who want to do the quests. So you kind of have a bit of everything you could possibly want. It's not Lord of the Rings Online, but it still has that low magic feel to it, to a degree. I guess it's more high magic than Lord of the Rings, but it definitely feels a lot more grounded in a world that you can imagine being somewhat like reality, as opposed to maybe Final Fantasy XIV, where it's all, you have a flying car mount, for gosh sakes, in Final Fantasy XIV. If you just want the, I guess the Dungeons and Dragons vibe in a game, it kind of has that, that sense of being excited about fantasy adventures. Just the generic fantasy adventures of tabletop gaming or classic, classic fantasy tropes. It's, I think it's worth mentioning that you can have a big world, and then you can also have a world that's filled with a lot of interesting things. And a game like Lord of the Rings Online has an absolutely enormous world. But when you add in things like voice acting and the number of interactable NPCs and the number of unique city hubs, I would venture to say that Elder Scrolls Online has a lot more to offer in terms of content than the Lord of the Rings Online. That wouldn't be true if you're talking about, how much quests are there to do, but then can you really compare a fully voice-acted quest with one that you just have to read the pop-up for? So, all things considered, I feel like the Elder Scrolls Online, overall, it's a more modern, it's a better game, it's a more well-supported game than Lord of the Rings Online. it's a lot more of an open world experience than
helpful.
something like Final Fantasy XIV. Then when you compare it to games like EVE Online or Albion Online, it's got so much more friendly of a community. And you got to mention that, because how much fun is it, really, if you're going to log into a game and the first thing you see every single time is people trolling and saying nasty things and just basically going out of their way to be as totally immature and obnoxious as they can possibly be. Like, if everything in global chat 24/7 all the time is something hateful toward another player, or it's something overtly offensive politically, or overtly offensive in a sexual way, or controversial in some way, like there's just so much of that in some of these games where you have people basically they're logging in just for the purpose of seeing if they can say something ridiculous to offend other people in global chat and draw attention to themselves. It's like, a bunch of 13-year-olds in a chat room. And sure, you can ignore the global chat or whatever, that's fine. But if you're going to be putting a lot of time into an MMO, the value of a reasonably civilized community is worth taking into account. Like, I don't need to spend, $15 a month so that I can expose myself to people who are least common denominator kind of people, who are exactly the kind of people I would never want to get to know on any level. If that's how it is, then I can always play a different game. And that's also something worth talking about. Like, we're so so surrounded by games that are really good games that you just buy once and you play forever. Then why pay a sub for a game? And that brings me to really the only two non-sub MMOs that I truly can recommend, and that would be New World and Guild Wars 2. And Guild Wars 2 just feels like a kind of a small game to me, in a way. It's a nice game, but it feels a bit empty compared to something like The Elder Scrolls Online. There's so much more in The Elder Scrolls Online. The lore feels so much more grounded in something meaningful. It's kind of like The Lord of the Rings or Tolkien. The Elder Scrolls is, in video game mythology, pretty well established. It's definitely got a lot of people who love it, who respect it, who contribute to it. Guild Wars 2 doesn't feel so well rounded. It's more like it gives you more of the vibe of just being something that was made for, made to be a video game, but not necessarily as I don't know if serious is the word, but not as credible as the Elder Scrolls. Then New World is it's a nice game, absolutely, but it feels soulless. It doesn't feel like there's anything special about it. Like, you can see another zone that you haven't seen before, or another town you haven't seen before, or find a quest that you haven't experienced before, and you just don't have any sense of curiosity. There's no sense of, oh, amazing, I want to see that. Because you can just tell that they made a game world which is technologically a bit more advanced than other MMOs, but it doesn't have any sense of world building. It doesn't have any sense of lore. It doesn't have any sense of long-standing passion driving it. It's just it's just you know, it's just a world that was made for a video game published by Amazon, and that published by Amazon thing really, it's very hard to get around that, because I'm all for a big game studio producing something. I'm not saying it needs to be like a little indie studio, but it, you know, it just doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel like Amazon really was a game studio. It felt like they decided they wanted to make a game studio be part of who they are, and they use the muscle of the other parts of their business to create the momentum to give that game exposure. But it wasn't really driven by the kind of passion that's made us truly love game worlds and really start to embrace them and feel like they're almost real places in our minds. So when you compare something like New World to Elder Scrolls Online, there's just no way at all that you could say that New World would compare. It's not a bad game, not at all. But when it comes to an MMO, I really want something that gives me a sense of wonder, that makes me want to explore, that makes me want to know what's around that next corner. And in the Elder Scrolls Online, I can see that. It's an amazing world map, which continually gets updated and expanded upon, and you know, I have nothing bad to say about it. It's just all around a good game. Now, could it get stale and boring and things? Yeah, of course. You know, any game can. But I really feel like out of all the MMOs I've tried, the Elder Scrolls Online does kind of a good job of taking that middle way approach and giving you the opportunity to have about the best experience in all ways possible. You know, and then you know, the truth is every MMO has something good about it and then something that's not as good about it, and that's what's hard, because if you want to say, well, what's the best MMO, well, I can't tell you that, because it really depends on what is the most important thing to you. You know, if the Lord of the Rings lore is the most important thing to you, then definitely Lotro is the best. If you're talking about having a wide open, uninstanced world without any loading screens, Lotro does a better job. You know, if you're looking for that legacy experience, it's also totally possible for some people that World of Warcraft is still the best MMO for them. And
search my packs. You will find nothing.
And yet,
this one is innocent. Tell her, Gomani.
If you're just looking for overall, what's the best one overall? Throw it all into the washing machine. Gun to the head. Make a choice. I really think there's a lot of reasons to say Elder Scrolls would probably be the best one that I have encountered. The other problem with MMOs is just that because they are meant to be a forever game, because they are such big time commitments, because they involve role-playing yourself as that character, there really is a lot of incentive to ask that question. What's the best one? And you really kind of have to, because I can play 50 different city builders or colony builder games or whatever because I just have a save file and I play for an hour or so, and then I hit save, and maybe I'll play a different game, and then when I feel like it, I'll come back to the other one, and it's fine. But with MMOs, the good ones, they do have some kind of a sub, which is fine. It's not a lot of money, but it's not going to make a lot of sense for you to be paying for a whole bunch of subscriptions. You want to pick one. You know, you want to immerse yourself in one experience. And so you do have to ask that question, what's the best one? For me, it's all about world building, and it's about that sense of exploration. It's about being open-ended in the sense that I can do whatever I want. And I really love the world of Elder Scrolls Online. I love it that you can be going through what feels like an Indian jungle. You can be exploring a desert island.
Find around the next corner.
You can go to, you know, a really beautiful elven castle. You can go to the gritty, often raining town that looks like, you know, medieval London and Daggerfall. You can go to the darker places in the game where it feels more like, you know, the underworld or something a bit more surreal. There's just so many different biomes, so many different places, and the worlds themselves speak for themselves, being very beautiful. The housing is beautiful. All of it's pretty amazing. Even like being able to have the little pets and the companion that travels along with you. It all just comes together to add to this sense of being a beautiful game. And then if you want to know more, if you want to feel more of a connection to the world, all you have to do is find a quest and jump in. And then you're going to, you know, you're going to experience the story of, you know, what makes all those places what they are. So, from my experience, I would say, so far, definitely enjoying the Elder Scrolls Online. And I'm sure I could say something good about every MMO that I've played, but I definitely have a lot of good to say about this game too. I would recommend it. It's worth a try to anybody who's into MMOs, but maybe not given it a shot yet. Anyway, it's a nice Sunday afternoon ride here in, well, I don't know where I even am. Malabal Tor, apparently. Hunting monkeys. And despite having put a number of hours into the game, I still have not significantly explored a lot of the map areas.
How did he even get into the ruin?
Lieutenant Ehron could be in luck.
It's always nice to hear the NPCs talking. Got a couple tigers in here. And it's nice that you can, you know, you could play the game just to quest if you wanted to. You could play the game just for the purpose of playing the economy. You could play the game just for the purpose of role-playing or some sort of social element. And you could have a good time. Regardless of what it is that you want to play the game for. which is pretty amazing. Oh, there's another player there. Just showed up out of the woodwork. That's cool. Well, that's where we will leave it. I hope that you are having a wonderful day, and until next time, goodbye.